There was a patient in the hospital, and they were there in their bed, and they reached for something on their nightstand, a cup of water, and when they did, they knocked it over and spilled it on the floor all beside the bed there. And the patient was a little bit afraid that they might slip on the water if they got out of bed, so they hit their little button and called for the nurse's aide to come in. And the patient didn't know it, but the hospital had a set of policies, a set of rules. And the rule was that if it was a small spill, the nurse's aide would come in and take care of it. But if it was a large spill, then housekeeping would come in with a mop and get it all mopped up. Well, the nurse's aide came in and she looked at the spill and she decided it was a large spill. And so she calls down to housekeeping. Housekeeping comes up and he looks at the spill and he says, "I'm sorry, but that's a small spill."
Yeah.
And they went back and forth about it for a little bit. You know, it's a small spill. No, it's a large spill. No, it's a small. Neither one of them wanted to take responsibility to clean it up. Until finally the patient decided he'd had enough. So he took the pitcher of water that was on his counter and he dumped it on the floor and said, "There, is that big enough for you?" It was, and it got cleaned up. You know, sometimes we are like that. You know, we often come up with excuses as to why we should accept a task or responsibility. You know, we would go, "Who? Me? Me? You want me to do that?" And we try to find out every excuse that we can to not do it. You know, and the thing is, people have always been that way. We're always looking for a way to get out of something. We don't want to, a lot of times, go beyond what we want to do. And so for the next few weeks, we're going to spend some time looking at some people who were called by God for some specific tasks. And they tried to find excuses why they weren't the right people to do it. Okay? You know, when we think of people in the Bible, we always think, well, they were just super spiritual and they just, whatever God asked, they didn't know. We got some people here that we're going to look at, and each one of them had an excuse why they shouldn't do it. Okay? And so that's what we're going to do. So today we're going to start with Moses. Now, most of you probably know Moses. If you don't, Moses was born in Egypt. His Pharaoh at the time was killing all the male babies because the Israelites were slaves and they were getting to be too large and they were kind of afraid of them. So they thought, well, let's keep the population down. We'll just kill all the male babies. And so Moses' mother put him in a basket, remember, and put him in the Nile River. And Pharaoh's daughter found him and they kind of adopted him. And later on, Moses, when he grew up, he went out to see where the slaves were at because he knew he was a Hebrew. And he was watching and saw a slave master beating up one of the Hebrew slaves. And so he killed him. And you remember he took off, didn't he? And so for 40 years he'd been off, away from Egypt. And he is now married, and he's a shepherd. He went from being in the palace to being a shepherd. And so now he's a shepherd. He's out one day with the sheep on Mount Sinai. And you might remember what happened. All of a sudden he sees a bush that is burning. But there's something unusual about the bush. It's burning, but it's not being burnt up. It still looks like the bush. It's not burning up at all. And so he thinks, I've got to go see this thing. And, you know, I'd be kind of curious about it too. What's going on here? So he took it, and then he hears God's voice. He says, to take off your shoes. You're standing on holy ground. And so he takes his shoes off. And then God tells him he has a plan for him. He has a task for him to do. He wants him to go back to Egypt, which, by the way, remember he's kind of wanted there because he's murdered somebody. He says, I want you to go back to Egypt. I want you to bring my people out of Egypt. Right? Basically, that's what he's saying. The people of Israel, the Hebrews, had been in slavery for now 400 years. A long time to be a group of slaves. And then they're crying out for God to free them. So God is now bringing Moses, wanting Moses to go back and to bring them out of the slavery. But when God tells Moses this, guess what? He comes up with a set of excuses. First one, he says, well, who am I? who am I to do that? I'm nobody. Who am I? And God says, don't worry, I'll be with you. And he says, well, who should I tell them sent me if they ask? He says, well, just tell them I am sent you. And then he goes, well, but what if they don't believe me? And he says, all right, I'll give you some signs here. First of all, take your staff, throw it down. And when he throws it down, it becomes a snake. He says, now take the snake, grab it by the tail, which Moses is a lot braver than me. Because I would never pick that thing up. So he pick it up and it became a staff again. He says, then he tells him, now take your hand, put it inside your cloak. He puts it inside his cloak, pulls it out, and it's got leprosy. He says, now put it back in. He puts it back in, brings it out, it's whole again. And he says, if that's not enough, I want you to hit the water and it will become blood. So he answers that way. He says, then he comes with this one. He says, but I'm not eloquent. He says, I'm slow of speech and tongue. So I kind of translate that as, I don't talk so good. Right? I don't talk so good. I'm not a very good speaker. And there's probably a lot of us here who would say the same thing. I'm not one to get up and make a speech, or talk in front of people. And that's exactly what he was going to have to do. He's going to have to go to Pharaoh and talk to him. And God says, don't worry, I'll tell you what to say. And then we get the last one, which is really the whole key of the whole thing. And he says, please find somebody else. I don't want to do this, all right? Please don't, if there's somebody else you can get. We've all been there, right?
Yeah.
We've all been there. What we usually say, well, if you can't find anybody else, come back and ask me. You know what that means? I don't want to do it, But that's kind of where he's at. And he says, please, find anybody else to do this. And so I want to read to you from Exodus 4. We're going to start with verse 14 and read down to verse 17. And this is what it says. It says, then the Lord's anger burned against Moses. Now, I don't know about you. I don't know God's anger burning against me at all. But it says it burned against Moses. And he said, what about your brother Aaron the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and his heart will be glad when he sees you. You shall speak to him and put words in his mouth. And I will help both of you speak and will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth, and as if you were God to him. But take this staff in your hand, so you can perform miraculous signs with it. See what God does? Moses says, find somebody else. What God does is kind of interesting. He gives Moses a partner. He gives Moses a companion. He gives him a co-worker, his brother Aaron, to help him to accomplish God's task. And what's interesting to me is that as you look through Scripture, God rarely calls somebody to do something for him by themselves. God usually has us do things in numbers, together. Now, there are those occasions when that's not true, where there were just one person or whatever. But most of the time, he's calling other people to do something for someone else. And I think there's some reasons why. The first one is that there is strength in numbers. There's strength in numbers. In Luke 10, it's interesting, we see Jesus sending out 72 pairs of people, 72 people in pairs, to go ahead of him into the towns where he's going to go. To kind of prepare the way for him. Let people know that he's coming. And he gives them a whole list of things that they're supposed to do, but notice he sends them in pairs. You know why? Because there's strength in numbers. To go there by yourself would be pretty frightening. But he's sending you in pair because you got somebody there to be with you. It's interesting when we see Paul go on his missionary journeys. We see Paul and Barnabas and Paul and Cyrus and all Silas and all these other people. Always with someone else. Paul didn't go by himself on his mission trips. We sometimes think that's true, but that's not. He didn't. In Ecclesiastes 4:12, it says this: though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. Football season's here. And I think a lot of you know that I help coach the middle school team. And one of the things we do with our offensive line is when we are going to run a ball through a certain hole, a certain gap in the line there. A lot of times the person who is there on the defense, we will do what we call a double team. Like the guard and the tackle will both take that guy so that we can make sure that person is taken care of. We want that person out of the way so that there's a hole for our running back to get through. And we know that sometimes, well, we know always that it's easier for two guys to move one than for one guy to move one, especially if the other guy happens to be bigger than you are. I'll never forget when I was in high school, one time I played tight end and we were supposed to do this block on the defensive tackle, myself and the tackle. And I remember the tackle said, I'm going to hit him low, you hit him high. And we did. This guy who was across from us was a big guy, one of the biggest guys on the team. And we hit him and he went backwards, flat on his back, because two are stronger than one. And so there was strength in numbers. That's why we send two people out together when we go out to visit people who've been to our Easter egg hunt. We like to go and visit those who don't have a church home. Just let them know that we're thinking about it, give them a little gift, and let them know we'd love to have them come. And we send two people because there's strength in numbers. It's kind of scary going up to somebody that you don't know's house, and so there's two. And so we do that, and for our Halloween extravaganza, the same thing. We send pairs out because there's strength in numbers. There's strength. We're told in 1 Corinthians 12 that the body of Christ, the church, is made up of people with different strengths and gifts. And so we need each other. Because you see, sometimes there are places where I'm weak. Right? There's some things that I don't do real well. Now, I know you probably find that hard to believe. But there's some things that I don't do real well. But guess what? Some of you do those really well. Yesterday we were at the men's prayer breakfast and they were looking for somebody to cook. And it was funny how many of the men said, I don't cook. I can't cook. I can't cook. And to be honest, there's probably some of them I don't want to cook. But the thing is that we need each other. And where one person is strong, someone, they may have a weakness here, and this person over here fills in that weakness. And we as a church need each other. And each one of us has our strengths that we can add to the body to make us stronger as a unit. One thing I do want to mention, though, is that we should never judge someone else by our strengths. We have a tendency to do that sometimes. That we judge others by where we're strong at. Well, they're not very good at this, this, or this. Well, that's all right. It's okay for them not to be good at that. Just because you are good at that doesn't mean everybody else is. So we need to be careful. Which brings us into the next reason, I think, that God gives us help in our tasks. And that is, we then have the ability to encourage one another. We have the ability to encourage each other. This week, we talked to our son Josh, who lives out near Seattle, Washington. And we talked to him via Facebook Messenger video chat. And so we were able to watch our granddaughter, who was about 13 months old. We got to watch her walking. All right? And but you know what? She's not very good at walking. So Karen and I scolded her very strongly. We let her know that you have to be sure to set your foot in the right part, in the right place on the ground, not get your feet too wide and spread apart. And we just let her know that she wasn't doing it right. No, we didn't.
I'm sure that.
We did not do that at all. What we did, we clapped for her. When she walked, when she took her 5 or 6 steps in a row, we would clap. And when she get back and when she fall, that's all right, get up. And she'd get up and we'd clap again. We'd tell her how good she was doing. We encouraged her. We didn't scold her. We didn't get on her because she wasn't doing it right. She was learning. I think in the church, we need to do the same thing. That when somebody's trying to do something, that we encourage them. We don't criticize them. We don't judge them because they're not doing it right. We encourage them. We want them to get better at it and help them and say, you're doing all right. Maybe it's not perfect yet, but you'll get there. And so that's what we need to do. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 and 25, it says this. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another all the more as you see the day approaching. You see that? But encouraging one another. That's what we're here for. We're not here to judge one another. We're not here to criticize one another. We're here to love each other and to encourage one another to do better. You know, sometimes we tend to criticize others by how we would do a task. But we need to learn to encourage one another just to do their best. Have you ever done this? I've been guilty of this. Have you ever stopped your kids from doing something because they weren't doing it the way you wanted it done? Okay? And said, here, let me do that. You ever said that?
Yep.
I'm guilty of that. And I wish I wasn't. All right? What does that teach them? What does it teach them? It teaches them that if they don't do it perfectly or they don't do it the way you want to do it, then it's not worth anything. And they may be able to do it in a different way. And it also tells them, I'm not going to try to help anymore. And sometimes I've seen that in churches, where people have been criticized for the way they did something when they were still learning how to do it. And they just said, I'm not going to do it anymore. And yet they could have been very, very good if they'd been encouraged to do it. See, we need to allow people to learn to serve God in a safe environment where they'll be encouraged to keep doing it. To learn how to use their strengths and to overcome their weaknesses. But at the same time, I think God gives us each other because it gives us the ability to hold each other accountable. In Hebrews 10:24, it says this again. It says, and let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. See that word spur? I like the way the New International Version translates that word. I like that word spur. The Greek word there means to provoke into action. All right? To provoke into action. And think about spurs. All right? Put that picture of spurs up there. You see it on there? Is it not there?
We all know what a spur.
Next one, I think. Everybody knows what spur is, right? All right, anyhow. There it is.
There you go.
All right. That's a picture of a spur, right? Spurs are used, cowboys have them, all right? There's that old song, I got spurs that jingle, jingle, jingle. Well, they do more than that. They poke them into the horse's side. Why? To provoke action. To get them to move, to go somewhere. And so when this tells us that we are to spur one another on to good works, I mean, sometimes we need a little poke. All right? Sometimes we need to be poked a little bit to do something. You know, as a church, we are to keep each other accountable. It's a whole lot easier to not do something when you're the only one doing it. Notice that? It's a whole lot easier not to do something when you're the only one doing it. Take, for example, exercise. When I was in Columbus, Indiana, as youth minister there, the associate minister, Mike Hogg, asked me if I would be willing to exercise with him a couple days a week. And he said, the reason for it is, if I don't have somebody to do it with, I just won't do it. But if I know I have to do it at a certain time with somebody, I'll do it. And you know what? The same was true for me. If there's some reason he had to be gone or something, guess what? I didn't go in and do it. I only did it if he was doing it. All right? And so he held me accountable, and I held him accountable. We would get together, we'd lift weights, we'd do crunches. I haven't seen crunches for a long time.
Yeah.
I miss mine. But anyhow, but we would do that together. Why? Because we had a partner who kept us accountable. And see, that's what we're supposed to do as a church. Kind of hold each other accountable. That doesn't mean judge and criticize. But it just means to encourage each other to do what we know we need to be doing. You know, when we're together, we can accomplish much more than we can by ourselves. You know, I think we often think that Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt by himself. You know, as we look back and think about that story, we think Moses, Moses, Moses. But you know what? When we look at Exodus and we start reading the story again, we see that Aaron is right there with them. It's actually Aaron who speaks to Pharaoh. And guess who actually struck the Nile with the staff? Aaron did. And who was the one who stretched his hand out to make the frogs come up on the land? It was Aaron. And if you read through there, it talks about Moses and Aaron. Moses and Aaron. And some of the reason we think it was just Moses. But Aaron was there. God gave Moses someone to help strengthen him to encourage him, and to hold him accountable. Moses needed Aaron. And God knows that we can't do it alone either. There's a lot of people think that they can be a Christian out by themselves and it'll be fine. But guess what? No, we need each other as the church. That's why we have the church. That's why we are called the body of Christ. That's why we are brothers and sisters. We need each other. Hebrews 10:24-25. Again, I want to read this one again to you. It says this. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. And notice this last part. And all the more as you see the day approaching. You know what day he's talking about?
Yeah.
Judgment Day. The coming of Christ. The day when we meet God. And he says that we need to do this all the more as we see the day approaching. And it's getting closer, people. I don't really know how far off it is. Sometimes I think it could be today. Then there's other times I think, well, maybe it'll be another 2,000 years. I don't know. But the thing is, it is approaching. And we need to be doing what God has called us to do. God has tasks for us. In Ephesians, it tells us that God has prepared works for us to do. That's for every one of us. Every one of us has something that we can do. You need to find out what it is. Because remember Moses, when he said, I'm not doing it? Can't you find somebody else? What happened? It says God's anger burned against him. I don't want God's anger burning against me. And I don't think you do either. So maybe we need to find out what God wants us to do. Maybe he's already given you opportunities. He said, I'm not doing that. You know what he says about that? If you know the good you ought to do and you don't do it, it is sin. And I think it was Richard who said one time, he says, I'm not so worried about the sins that I commit, the things I'm not supposed to do. It's those things that I'm supposed to do that I worry more about. And that's the way it is. And someone else said, you know, if we did all the things we're supposed to do, we wouldn't have time to do all those things we're not supposed to do.
Probably true.
And so we need to do what God calls us to do because the day is approaching. We've been given a task to do, and we need each other to accomplish it. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for your word. We thank you that you have provided opportunities for us to serve you. And sometimes, Father, we see that as a chore, but we ought to see it as an opportunity and as a privilege. That the God of the universe, that the one who loves us, the one who gave his Son for us, would desire for us to work for him, to do things for his kingdom. That's an awesome thing to be asked for. It's an honor and a privilege to serve you. Help us to see it that way. And help us to be there for one another, to encourage each other, to strengthen one another, and hold each other accountable. That we might really be a church, a body of believers that makes a difference in our community and in the world, Father. And so use us. Show us those opportunities. May we be willing to do what you call us to do. May we not come up with excuses. And so we pray, Father, that you give us all that we need because you will. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. This moment we're going to sing our song together. And the song we're using this morning is Jesus I Come. That's the first step, you know. We come to Jesus, and then he's going to enable us to do what we need to do. But we have to be moved. We have to be moved. Next week, our message is going to be who me, and I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. And we're going to look at that and see what God has to say about that. Okay? But if you need to make a decision today, if you need to come to Jesus, we'd love to talk to you about that and share with you what God has done for you and what he desires of you. And maybe you've got things going on in your life, some struggles, some things that you're really having a hard time with. We'd like to talk to you about that too and pray with you We have people who are willing to do